The coffee cup trembled in Maya Chen's hand as she watched the 20-story Meridian Plaza sway, just barely, almost imperceptibly, in the autumn wind. From her station by the window of Rosie's diner, she could see what others couldn't: the subtle buckling in the building's eastern corner, the way the glass panels reflected light at angles that shouldn't exist, the hairline fractures spreading like spider webs through the concrete facade. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us a long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. "Maya, table 7 needs their check," called Rosie Martinez from behind the counter, her weathered hands working the espresso machine with practiced efficiency. At 62, Rosie had owned this corner diner for 37 years, serving everyone from construction workers grabbing pre-dawn breakfast to late-night medical residents from the nearby hospital. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled back in the same neat bun she'd worn since the 80s, and her apron bore the permanent stains of 1,000 meals served with love and no small amount of sass. Maya's fingers tightened around the coffee pot as another micro-tremor ran through the building across the street. She'd been watching Meridian Plaza for 3 months now, ever since she'd started working the morning shift at Rosie's. What began as casual observation, the kind any person might give to the view from their workplace, had evolved into something closer to obsession. Her structural engineering degree from MIT, earned through night classes and weekend study sessions while working 2 jobs, had trained her eyes to see what others missed. "Maya!" Rosie's voice carried the gentle but firm tone of someone who'd managed countless employees over the decades. "Honey, you're going to wear a hole in that window staring at that building. What's got you so fascinated?" Maya turned from the window, her dark eyes reflecting a mixture of professional concern and growing anxiety. At 28, she possessed the kind of quiet intelligence that often went unnoticed in a bustling diner environment. Her black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her uniform, a simple blue dress with the diner's logo, concealed the notebook she always kept in her pocket, filled with sketches and calculations that would have surprised her regular customers. "It's nothing, Rosie. Just, the building looks different today." Maya moved toward table 7, where Dr. James Harrison sat reviewing patient charts over his usual black coffee and blueberry pancakes. At 45, Dr. Harrison worked the emergency department at St. Mary's Hospital 2 blocks away. His sandy brown hair was perpetually disheveled, and his blue scrubs bore the telltale signs of a 12-hour shift that had started before dawn. "Different how?" Dr. Harrison looked up from his charts, his hazel eyes showing the keen attention of someone trained to notice details others missed. Over the past 6 months of regular breakfasts at Rosie's, he had developed a respectful rapport with Maya, impressed by her thoughtful observations about everything from weather patterns to traffic flow. Maya hesitated, refilling his coffee cup while glancing back toward the window. "The building's moving wrong. Buildings are supposed to have some flex in wind. It's actually necessary for structural integrity. But Meridian Plaza—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "It's moving in ways that suggest the internal support structure is compromised." "You sound like you know what you're talking about," Dr. Harrison said, setting down his fork. "Are you in construction or architecture?" "Structural engineering," Maya replied quietly, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I have a degree from MIT. I've been working here while looking for opportunities in my field." Rosie appeared beside them, having caught the tail end in the conversation. Her expression softened with a mixture of pride and concern. "Maya is brilliant," she said, placing a protective hand on the younger woman's shoulder. "She's been sketching buildings and bridges since her first week here. Show him that notebook of yours, mija." Maya reluctantly pulled out her notebook, its pages filled with detailed structural analyses of various buildings in their downtown district. Dr. Harrison examined the precise drawings and calculations, his eyebrows rising with each page. The sketches showed load-bearing wall distributions, foundation stress analyses, and wind resistance calculations that demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of structural engineering principles. "These are incredibly detailed," Dr. Harrison said, genuine admiration in his voice. "What specifically concerns you about Meridian Plaza?" Maya flipped to a section dedicated entirely to the 20-story building. Her drawing showed the building from multiple angles, with detailed annotations marking areas of concern. The eastern corner has been showing signs of settlement for months. The building was constructed in 1987, and the original foundation work was done during one of the wettest springs on record. I've been tracking the micro-movements, and they're accelerating. She pointed to a series of measurements and calculations. Yesterday morning, the building's lean was 0.3 degrees from true vertical. This morning, it's 0.7 degrees. That might not sound like much, but for a structure of this size and age, it represents a catastrophic rate of change. Dr. Harrison studied the calculations, his medical training helping him understand the precision of Maya's methodology. What do you think caused the acceleration? The construction work on the adjacent lot. They've been excavating for the new parking garage next door for the past 3 weeks. The vibrations from the heavy machinery, combined with the change in soil stability from removing earth so close to Meridian's foundation, has likely compromised the building's structural integrity. Rosie looked between Maya and Dr. Harrison, her maternal instincts sensing something serious in their conversation. "Are you saying the building could be dangerous?" Maya's hands trembled slightly as she closed the notebook. "I think it could collapse. Soon." The words hung in the air like smoke from burnt coffee. Dr. Harrison set down his coffee cup with deliberate care, his medical experience having taught him to recognize the difference between idle worry and legitimate concern. Maya's analysis showed the methodical approach of someone who understood her field deeply. "Have you contacted anyone about this? The building management? The city?" Dr. Harrison asked. Maya's laugh was bitter and short. "I'm a waitress with a degree nobody cares about. Who's going to listen to me? I called the building management company last week. They thanked me for my concern and told me they'd look into it. I called the city's building inspection department. They said they'd add it to their list for routine inspection, which could take months." "But you're an MIT graduate with expertise in structural engineering," Dr. Harrison protested. "I'm a waitress," Maya repeated, her voice flat. "That's all anyone sees. The degree doesn't matter if you're pouring coffee for a living." Rosie's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and determination. "That's not right. If Maya says there's a problem, there's a problem. I've seen her predict everything from that water main break last spring to the crack in the community center's foundation. She has a gift." Through the window, Meridian Plaza continued its barely perceptible sway. Maya had counted 2,847 people entering and leaving the building during her shifts over the past month. Office workers, visitors, maintenance staff, delivery personnel, all unaware that they were working and conducting business in a structure that she believed was approaching critical failure. The building housed Morrison & Associates law firm on floors 15 through 18 with nearly 200 employees. Zenith Marketing occupied floors 10 through 14, employing another 150 people. The lower floors contained various smaller businesses, an insurance agency, a dental practice, an accounting firm, and a popular lunch cafe that served the downtown business district.
Maya had memorized the building's occupancy patterns. Peak times were between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. when most employees arrived, and between noon and 2 p.m. when the lunch cafe was busiest. If the building failed during peak hours, the casualty count could reach into the hundreds. "What would it take for someone to listen to you?" Dr. Harrison asked, his question cutting through Maya's grim calculations. "An inspection by a licensed structural engineer supported by the city building department with documentation that meets municipal code requirements for emergency building assessment," Maya recited, having researched the process extensively. "The cost starts at around $15,000, and there's a 6-week waiting list for independent inspections." $15,000 to potentially save hundreds of lives, Dr. Harrison mused. That seems like a reasonable investment. For someone who has $15,000, I'm working double shifts to cover my student loans and help my mother with her medical expenses. Rosie wiped her hands on her apron. A gesture Maya had learned indicated the older woman was preparing to make a decision. What if we could raise the money? This diner serves half the downtown business district. People know me, trust me. If I told them there was a safety concern. Rosie, you can't ask your customers to fund an engineering inspection based on my observations. What if I'm wrong? What if the building is fine and we waste everyone's money on my paranoia? And what if you're right and we do nothing? Dr. Harrison countered. As a doctor, I took an oath to do no harm. That includes acting when I have knowledge that could prevent harm to others. Maya looked out the window again, watching office workers stream into Meridian Plaza for another normal Tuesday morning. A young woman in a red coat juggled coffee in a briefcase while talking on the phone. An older man in a gray suit held the door for a maintenance worker carrying supplies. Children from the nearby elementary school walked past on their way to classes, their bright backpacks and animated chatter a stark contrast to Maya's growing sense of dread. The building's sway seemed more pronounced now, though Maya knew it might be her imagination, heightened by anxiety and 3 months of obsessive observation. She had run the calculations dozens of times, checking and rechecking her methodology. The mathematics were clear. Meridian Plaza was in distress, and the distress was accelerating. "There's something else," Maya said quietly, her voice barely audible above the morning chatter of the diner. "I've been tracking seismic activity in the area. There's a minor fault line that runs about 2 miles east of here. It's been more active in recent months. Nothing major, just micro-tremors that most people wouldn't notice. But a building that's already structurally compromised?" She didn't finish the sentence. Dr. Harrison and Rosie understood the implication. "How much time do you think we have?" Dr. Harrison asked. Maya pulled out her notebook again, flipping to a page covered with probability calculations and stress analysis charts. "Based on the rate of structural degradation and the additional stress factors from ongoing construction, I estimate we have between 2 and 6 weeks before the risk becomes critical. But that's assuming no additional stressors, no unusual weather, no seismic events, no changes to the load distribution within the building." 2 weeks, Rosie repeated, her voice heavy with the weight of potential tragedy. Maya nodded grimly. "Maybe less. Yesterday's rain worried me. Water infiltration can accelerate the deterioration of compromised concrete and steel. And they're forecasting storms for the end of this week." The diner fell quiet around them as the morning rush began to wind down. Regular customers nursed their coffee and prepared for their workdays, unaware of the conversation taking place by the window. Maya watched them with growing urgency, knowing that many of these same people would spend their days in buildings throughout the downtown district, potentially including Meridian Plaza. "I need to try again," Maya said suddenly, standing up with renewed determination. "I need to contact the building management, the city, anyone who will listen. Maybe if I present the data differently, explain the urgency more clearly." "And what if they still don't listen?" Dr. Harrison asked.
Maya looked out at Meridian Plaza one more time, its subtle sway now seeming like a countdown timer visible only to her. "Then I'll have to find another way to make them listen. Because I won't be able to live with myself if I'm right, and I didn't do everything possible to prevent it." The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows between the downtown buildings. In those shadows, Maya saw the outline of a disaster that only she seemed capable of preventing. The question that would haunt her through the coming days was simple, but terrifying. How do you convince the world to listen when you're just a waitress with a notebook full of calculations that could mean the difference between life and death for hundreds of people? The coffee in Maya's hand had long since grown cold. Maya's alarm clock buzzed at 4:30 a.m., just as it had every morning for the past 8 months. She rolled out of bed in the studio apartment she shared with her mother, Elena, careful not to disturb the older woman's sleep. Alana Chen worked the night shift at a textile factory 20 minutes away, and their schedules were carefully choreographed to maximize the small apartment's efficiency while minimizing their rent burden. The apartment itself told the story of their careful financial balance. Secondhand furniture arranged with an eye for both function and comfort. Textbooks from Maya's MIT years stacked neatly beside Alana's Spanish-language romance novels. A small altar in the corner held photos of Maya's father, who had died in a construction accident when Maya was 16, the event that had first sparked her interest in structural safety and engineering. Maya moved quietly through her morning routine, brewing coffee in a machine that Rosie had given her after upgrading the diner's equipment. She stood at the small window while the coffee brewed, looking out at the pre-dawn cityscape. Even from 6 blocks away, she could see Meridian Plaza rising above the surrounding buildings, its silhouette visible against the slowly lightening sky. Her notebook lay open on the small kitchen table, pages covered with new calculations she'd worked on after her shift the previous day. She'd been thinking about wind-load coefficients and foundation settlement patterns until nearly midnight, trying to refine her timeline estimates. Every calculation pointed to the same conclusion. Meridian Plaza was living on borrowed time. "Mija," Alana's voice came softly from the bed across the room. "You're up early even for you." Maya turned to see her mother propping herself up on one elbow, her graying hair loose around her shoulders. At 51, Alana carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had worked hard her entire life to provide for her family. Her hands showed the permanent stains of fabric dyes, and her shoulders bore the slight forward curve of someone who spent hours bent over industrial sewing machines. "I couldn't sleep," Maya admitted, pouring coffee for both of them. "I keep thinking about the building." Alana accepted the coffee gratefully, inhaling the steam. "The one you're worried about collapsing?" Maya nodded, sitting on the edge of the bed. Over the past few weeks, she had shared her concerns with her mother, who listened with the patient attention she had always given to Maya's academic pursuits. Alana might not understand structural engineering, but she understood her daughter's intelligence and intuition. "Have you thought about what your father would say?" Alana asked gently. Maya's throat tightened at the mention of her father. David Chen had been a construction foreman who took pride in building things that would last. He had often brought Maya to job sites, teaching her to recognize good craftsmanship and spot potential problems. His death in a preventable accident, caused by a contractor cutting corners on safety equipment, had shaped her understanding of how small oversights could lead to devastating consequences. He would say that knowledge without action is just expensive ignorance. Maya replied, repeating one of her father's favorite sayings. "Then you know what you need to do." Maya sipped her coffee, thinking about the day ahead. She had called in sick to her evening job at the office cleaning service, planning to spend the afternoon trying to get someone in authority to take her concerns seriously. The building management company had scheduled her for a brief phone call at 2 p.m., a small victory after days of persistent calling.
By 5:30 a.m., Maya was walking the familiar 6 blocks to Rosie's diner. The early morning streets were quiet, except for delivery trucks and the occasional taxi. She used the walk to organize her thoughts, reviewing the key points she wanted to make to the building management company. The accelerating rate of structural movement, the risk factors from adjacent construction, the potential for catastrophic failure. Rosie was already at the diner when Maya arrived, as she had been every morning for 37 years. The older woman moved through the opening routine with practiced efficiency, starting the coffee machines, checking inventory, setting up the prep stations for the day's meals. The diner itself was a study in functional nostalgia. Red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floors, a long counter with chrome stools, and windows that provided perfect views of the downtown business district. "You look tired, Mija," Rosie observed as Maya tied her apron. "Still losing sleep over that building?" "I keep running the numbers, looking for something I might have missed," Maya replied, pulling her notebook from her pocket. "But every analysis comes back to the same conclusion. The building is in serious danger." Rosie poured 2 cups of coffee, sliding one across the counter to Maya. "Dr. Harrison left something for you yesterday evening," she said, retrieving an envelope from the cash register. "He said to tell you he meant what he said about helping with the inspection costs." Maya opened the envelope to find a check for $2,500 and a note written on hospital letterhead. "Maya, I've seen enough preventable tragedies in the ER to know that expertise should be taken seriously, regardless of where it comes from. This is a start toward getting the inspection you need. Let me know how else I can help. Jim Harrison." Maya stared at the check, overwhelmed by the gesture. $2,500 represented nearly 3 months of her diner wages, money that Dr. Harrison was willing to invest based on her analysis and their brief conversations. "He's a good man," Rosie said, watching Maya's reaction. "And he believes in you. So do I." The morning rush began earlier than usual, with office workers stopping for coffee and breakfast before heading to their jobs throughout the downtown district. Maya served them with her usual efficiency, but found herself studying each customer more carefully. How many of them worked in Meridian Plaza? How many would be at risk if her worst fears came true? Mrs. Patterson, a regular customer who worked as a paralegal at Morrison & Associates, ordered her usual: scrambled eggs with wheat toast and orange juice. She was in her early 60s, a grandmother of 3 who often showed Maya photos of her grandchildren. Maya had calculated that Mrs. Patterson's office was on the 17th floor of Meridian Plaza, in one of the areas that would be most vulnerable if the eastern corner of the building failed. "Mrs. Patterson, dear, you seem distracted today," Mrs. Patterson observed as Maya refilled her coffee cup. "Everything all right?" Maya hesitated, looking into the older woman's kind eyes. How do you tell someone that their workplace might collapse without sounding like a paranoid conspiracy theorist? "Mrs. Patterson, do you ever notice anything unusual about your building? Any structural issues or concerns?" Mrs. Patterson considered the question seriously. "Well, the elevators have been acting up lately, and there was a crack in the wall near the copy machine that maintenance said they'd look into. Why do you ask?" "Just curious about building maintenance. Old buildings can develop issues over time." "Oh, Meridian Plaza isn't that old. It was built in the late 80s, so it's only about 35 years old, still practically new by downtown standards." Maya nodded, not mentioning that 35 years was exactly the age when many buildings began showing serious structural problems, especially if they had been constructed during challenging weather conditions or with substandard materials. As the morning rush continued, Maya served other Meridian Plaza employees: Tom Rodriguez from the accounting firm on the 3rd floor, Sarah Kim from Zenith Marketing on the 12th, and David Walsh, a maintenance supervisor who worked throughout the building. Each interaction heightened her sense of urgency and responsibility. During a brief lull between breakfast and lunch service, Maya called the building management company from the diner's phone. After being transferred 3 times, she finally reached Jennifer Walsh, a property manager who sounded harried and impatient. "Miss Chen, I have your file here," Jennifer said. "You called last week about structural concerns regarding Meridian Plaza. I want to assure you that we take all safety concerns seriously, but we need to be practical about responding to every concern that gets called in." Maya took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. "Miss Walsh, I have a degree in structural engineering from MIT. I've been observing the building for 3 months, and I believe it's showing signs of serious structural distress that could lead to catastrophic failure. I appreciate your concern, but we have our own engineering consultants who inspect the building annually. The last inspection was completed 6 months ago, and no significant issues were identified. Has there been any recent inspection since the construction work began on the adjacent lot? The vibrations and excavation could have accelerated any existing structural problems." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "The construction work was properly permitted and reviewed by the city. If there were any concerns about impact on surrounding buildings, they would have been addressed during the permitting process." Maya felt her frustration rising.
Miss Walsh, I'm not trying to create problems or file lawsuits. I'm genuinely concerned about the safety of the people who work in that building. Would it be possible for someone from your engineering team to just take a look at the eastern corner of the building? I can provide specific areas of concern and documentation of the changes I've observed. Miss Chen, I understand you're trying to help, but we can't respond to every amateur analysis of our buildings. We have professional engineers who handle these matters. I am a professional engineer, Maya said firmly. I may work as a waitress, but my engineering credentials are legitimate. If you're truly concerned, you can file a formal complaint with the city building department. They have procedures for handling structural concerns. I already contacted the city. They said it could take months for an inspection. Then I'm sure you understand that these processes take time. If there were an immediate danger, the city would expedite the inspection. Maya felt the conversation slipping away from her. Miss Walsh, what if I could provide funding for an independent structural inspection? Would you allow access to the building for a qualified engineer to assess the areas I've identified? Another pause. Miss Chen, are you saying you want to pay for an engineering inspection of our building? If that's what it takes to ensure people's safety, yes. Jennifer Walsh's voice took on a slightly more respectful tone. That's unusual, but not unheard of. If you can arrange for a licensed structural engineer with appropriate insurance and credentials, we could potentially allow access for an inspection, but it would need to be scheduled through proper channels, with advance notice and with our own engineer present. Maya felt a spark of hope. What would be the process for arranging that? You'd need to provide credentials for your engineer, proof of professional liability insurance, a detailed inspection plan, and a scheduling request at least 2 weeks in advance. The total process usually takes 3 to 4 weeks. Maya's heart sank. 3 to 4 weeks might be longer than they had, based on her calculations. Is there any way to expedite the process, if there truly is a safety concern? Miss Chen, if you genuinely believe there's an imminent danger, you should contact emergency services or the city's emergency building inspection unit. But I have to warn you, filing false emergency reports carries serious legal consequences. The conversation ended with Jennifer Walsh promising to email Maya the formal procedures for requesting an inspection. Maya hung up, feeling more frustrated than ever. She had made progress, but the timeline was still unacceptably long.
Rosie had been listening to the conversation from across the diner. "No luck?" she asked gently. "They'll allow an inspection, but it could take a month to arrange," Maya replied. "I don't think we have that long." "Then we need to find another way," Rosie said with determination. "This diner has been serving this community for nearly 4 decades. People trust me. Maybe it's time to use that trust." Maya looked out the window at Meridian Plaza, where the lunch crowd was beginning to gather at the ground floor cafe. Office workers streamed in and out of the building, conducting their daily business in a structure that she believed was counting down to disaster. Her notebook lay open beside the cash register, filled with calculations that could save hundreds of lives, if only she could find someone with the authority and willingness to act on them. The weight of knowledge without power pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. "Maya," Rosie said quietly, "what if I'm wrong? What if I'm just a paranoid waitress who's seeing problems that don't exist?" Rosie looked at Maya with the fierce love of someone who had spent decades watching young people struggle to find their place in the world. "Mija, I've seen you predict problems that no one else noticed, time and time again. Remember when you warned me about the water damage in the basement? Or when you said the traffic light timing was causing accidents at 5th and Main? You were right every time. But this is different. This is people's lives. Which is exactly why we can't give up." Rosie squeezed Maya's hand. "Your father would be proud of you for caring enough to fight for strangers' safety. Now we just need to figure out how to make the right people listen." As the afternoon wore on, Maya continued serving customers while her mind worked through possible solutions. Dr. Harrison's check represented a start, but she needed more than money. She needed credibility, access, and most importantly, time. The building management company's email arrived during the dinner rush, outlining a bureaucratic process that seemed designed to discourage rather than facilitate safety inspections. Maya read through the requirements while refilling coffee cups and taking orders, her frustration growing with each procedural hurdle. By closing time, Maya had made a decision. If official channels were too slow and bureaucratic, she would have to find unofficial ones. She thought about Mrs. Patterson, Tom Rodriguez, Sarah Kim, and all the other people she served who worked in Meridian Plaza. Maybe the solution wasn't to convince the people in charge. Maybe it was to convince the people at risk. As she walked home through the quiet downtown streets, Maya looked up at Meridian Plaza's darkened windows and made a silent promise to her father and to every person who would enter that building tomorrow. She would find a way to save them, even if it meant risking everything she had worked for. The notebook in her pocket felt heavier with each step, weighted with the responsibility of knowledge that demanded action.
Excuse me, Mr. Walsh. I'm Maya Chen from Rosie's Diner. I serve you coffee most mornings. David looked puzzled, but not unfriendly. Oh, right, Maya. You're the one who always remembers I like extra sugar. What are you doing here so early? Maya handed him one of her reports. I need to show you something important about this building. I have a structural engineering degree, and I've been analyzing Meridian Plaza for the past 3 months. I believe it's in serious danger of collapse. David's expression shifted from puzzled to skeptical as he flipped through the report. You're a structural engineer, but you work at the diner. I work at the diner to pay my bills, while looking for opportunities in my field. But my analysis of this building is based on solid engineering principles. Look at page 3. You can see the photographic evidence of the building's movement over time. David studied the photographs, which showed the same corner of the building taken from the same position at weekly intervals. The progression was subtle but unmistakable. The building was leaning more dramatically with each passing week. I have noticed some things, David admitted slowly. Doors that used to close properly are sticking. There are new cracks in the walls on several floors. And the elevator alignment has been getting worse. We've had 3 service calls in the past month. Maya felt a surge of hope. Those are all symptoms of structural settling and movement. Mr. Walsh, how many people work in this building on a typical day? Full capacity is about 450 employees, plus visitors, delivery people, maintenance staff, probably 500 to 600 people at peak times. Maya pulled out her notebook and showed him her occupancy calculations. I've been tracking the patterns. The most dangerous time would be between noon and 2 p.m., when the lunch cafe is busiest and most employees are in the building simultaneously. David was quiet for a long moment, reading through Maya's analysis. You really think this building could collapse? I think it will collapse, Maya said firmly. The question is when, not if. And based on my calculations, it could happen within the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks? David's face paled. Jesus Christ. What are you planning to do about it? I'm trying to get someone in authority to order an emergency inspection, but the process is taking too long. I was hoping that if employees started asking questions and demanding answers, it might push the building management to act more quickly. David looked up at the building he had maintained for 8 years, seeing it with new eyes. Maya, if you're right about this, we need to do more than hand out reports. We need to get people out of this building. But I'm just a waitress with an engineering degree. Who's going to listen to me tell them to evacuate their workplace? I'm the senior maintenance supervisor. I have relationships with the property management company, the major tenants, and the building safety committee. If I back up your analysis with what I've been observing... David paused, the weight of potential responsibility settling on his shoulders. This is a hell of a thing to ask someone to believe. Maya understood his hesitation. Mr. Walsh, I know how this sounds. I know what I'm asking people to risk by taking me seriously. But I also know what the consequences could be if we do nothing and I'm right. David folded the report and put it in his pocket. Give me your phone number. I need to think about this and I need to check some things in the building. Can you meet me here at lunchtime? Maya wrote her number on the back of another report. Mr. Walsh, please don't wait too long. Every day we delay increases the risk. As David entered the building, Maya continued distributing reports to arriving employees. Most people took them politely but skeptically. A few, however, stopped to read more carefully and ask questions.
Excuse me, Mr. Walsh. I'm Maya Chen from Rosie's Diner. I serve you coffee most mornings. David looked puzzled, but not unfriendly. Oh, right, Maya. You're the one who always remembers I like extra sugar. What are you doing here so early? Maya handed him one of her reports. I need to show you something important about this building. I have a structural engineering degree, and I've been analyzing Meridian Plaza for the past 3 months. I believe it's in serious danger of collapse. David's expression shifted from puzzled to skeptical as he flipped through the report. You're a structural engineer, but you work at the diner. I work at the diner to pay my bills, while looking for opportunities in my field. But my analysis of this building is based on solid engineering principles. Look at page 3. You can see the photographic evidence of the building's movement over time. David studied the photographs, which showed the same corner of the building taken from the same position at weekly intervals. The progression was subtle but unmistakable. The building was leaning more dramatically with each passing week. I have noticed some things, David admitted slowly. Doors that used to close properly are sticking. There are new cracks in the walls on several floors. And the elevator alignment has been getting worse. We've had 3 service calls in the past month. Maya felt a surge of hope. Those are all symptoms of structural settling and movement. Mr. Walsh, how many people work in this building on a typical day? Full capacity is about 450 employees, plus visitors, delivery people, maintenance staff, probably 500 to 600 people at peak times. Maya pulled out her notebook and showed him her occupancy calculations. I've been tracking the patterns. The most dangerous time would be between noon and 2 p.m., when the lunch cafe is busiest and most employees are in the building simultaneously. David was quiet for a long moment, reading through Maya's analysis. You really think this building could collapse? I think it will collapse, Maya said firmly. The question is when, not if. And based on my calculations, it could happen within the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks? David's face paled. Jesus Christ. What are you planning to do about it? I'm trying to get someone in authority to order an emergency inspection, but the process is taking too long. I was hoping that if employees started asking questions and demanding answers, it might push the building management to act more quickly. David looked up at the building he had maintained for 8 years, seeing it with new eyes. Maya, if you're right about this, we need to do more than hand out reports. We need to get people out of this building. But I'm just a waitress with an engineering degree. Who's going to listen to me tell them to evacuate their workplace? I'm the senior maintenance supervisor. I have relationships with the property management company, the major tenants, and the building safety committee. If I back up your analysis with what I've been observing— David paused, the weight of potential responsibility settling on his shoulders. This is a hell of a thing to ask someone to believe. Maya understood his hesitation. Mr. Walsh, I know how this sounds. I know what I'm asking people to risk by taking me seriously. But I also know what the consequences could be if we do nothing and I'm right. David folded the report and put it in his pocket. Give me your phone number. I need to think about this and I need to check some things in the building. Can you meet me here at lunchtime? Maya wrote her number on the back of another report. Mr. Walsh, please don't wait too long. Every day we delay increases the risk. As David entered the building, Maya continued distributing reports to arriving employees. Most people took them politely but skeptically. A few, however, stopped to read more carefully and ask questions.
Mrs. Patterson arrived at 8:30 a.m., her usual cheerful demeanor shifting to concern as she read Maya's analysis. "Dear, this is terrifying if it's true. Have you contacted the authorities?" "I've tried, Mrs. Patterson. The building management says it could take weeks to arrange an inspection. The city building department has a months-long backlog. I'm running out of official channels." "What about the fire department? Don't they have authority to declare buildings unsafe?" Maya's eyes widened. She hadn't considered contacting the fire department. "That's a good idea. Do you know anyone there?" "My nephew is a fire captain at Station 19, about 6 blocks from here. Captain Robert Patterson. I could give him a call." "Would you? Mrs. Patterson, this could make the difference between preventing a disaster and witnessing one." Mrs. Patterson promised to contact her nephew immediately after reaching her office. Maya felt her first real surge of hope in days. By 10 a.m., Maya had distributed 30 reports and had several meaningful conversations with building employees. Word was beginning to spread through the building's informal networks. Sarah Kim from Zenith Marketing had promised to discuss the concerns with her department head. Tom Rodriguez from the accounting firm said he would raise the issue with his company's safety committee. Maya returned to Rosie's diner to work her regular shift, but found it difficult to concentrate on serving customers. Every few minutes, she looked out at Meridian Plaza, noting how the morning wind seemed to cause more pronounced movement in the building's upper floors. Dr. Harrison arrived for his usual late breakfast, bringing with him Captain Robert Patterson from the fire department. Captain Patterson was a tall, serious man in his early 40s, with the bearing of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions under pressure. "Maya, Captain Patterson has agreed to look at your analysis," Dr. Harrison said. "I took the liberty of explaining your background and concerns." Captain Patterson accepted coffee from Maya and studied her report with professional attention. "Miss Chen, fire department protocol allows us to order building evacuations if we determine there's an imminent threat to life safety. However, we need clear evidence that the threat is real and immediate." Maya sat down with him, pulling out her notebook with the detailed calculations. "Captain Patterson, I can show you the mathematical basis for my concerns, but I think the most convincing evidence might be a visual inspection of the building itself." "You mean go look at it directly?" "Yes. From the outside, you can see the settlement in the eastern corner. And if Mr. Walsh, the maintenance supervisor, is willing to show us some of the internal signs he mentioned, I think the evidence would be overwhelming." Captain Patterson considered this. "If I were to conduct an unofficial assessment, not a formal inspection, just looking around, and if I saw evidence that supported your analysis, I would have the authority to order an immediate evacuation pending a formal engineering assessment." Maya felt her pulse quicken. "How quickly could that happen?" "If I saw clear and present danger, I could order an evacuation within hours. But Miss Chen, I need to be absolutely certain. False alarms can destroy careers and cause massive economic disruption." Maya nodded, understanding the weight of what she was asking. "Captain Patterson, I've been over these calculations dozens of times. I've consulted my old textbooks, reviewed case studies of similar failures, and even reached out to one of my former professors at MIT for guidance. Everything points to the same conclusion." Dr. Harrison leaned forward. "What would convince you, Captain? What would you need to see?"
Visible structural distress that correlates with Ms. Chen's analysis. Evidence of accelerating deterioration. Signs that the building's stability is compromised in ways that could lead to immediate failure. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message from David Walsh. "Can you meet me at the building in 20 minutes? I found something you need to see." Maya showed the message to Captain Patterson and Dr. Harrison. "Mr. Walsh is the maintenance supervisor. He's been working in that building for 8 years." Captain Patterson stood up. Decision made. "Let's go take a look." The three of them walked the 2 blocks to Meridian Plaza, where David Walsh was waiting in the lobby. His face was grim, and he carried a folder thick with maintenance reports and photographs. "Maya, I've been going through our records since this morning," David said. "I pulled 8 years of maintenance logs, repair requests, and structural issues. When I laid them out chronologically, a pattern emerged that I never noticed before. He opened the folder to reveal a timeline of building problems. Elevator misalignment starting 18 months ago, increasing frequency of door frame adjustments, new cracks in load-bearing walls, and plumbing issues caused by shifting pipe connections. "Look at this," David said, pointing to a series of repair orders. "Every single one of these issues can be explained by gradual building settlement and movement. I thought they were just normal wear and tear, but when you see them all together..." Captain Patterson studied the maintenance records with growing concern. "Mr. Walsh, how long have you been in building maintenance?" 23 years, Captain. I've worked in dozens of buildings throughout the city. I know what normal settling looks like, and I know what structural problems look like. I should have seen this pattern months ago." Maya felt a mixture of vindication and urgency. "Mr. Walsh, can you show us some of the internal issues you mentioned?" David led them to the elevator bank, where Maya immediately noticed the misalignment Captain Patterson had mentioned. The elevator doors didn't sit flush with the floor, and there was a slight but noticeable gap between the elevator car and the building floor on the right side. "This is elevator 3, David explained. "We've adjusted the alignment 4 times in the past 6 months. Each time it settles back into this position within a few weeks." Captain Patterson knelt down to examine the gap, using his flashlight to look at the structural connections. "This isn't normal settling. This indicates differential movement between the elevator shaft and the rest of the building structure." They took the elevator to the 17th floor where Mrs. Patterson's law firm was located. David led them to a conference room that faced the eastern corner of the building, the area Maya had identified as most compromised. "Look at this," David said, pointing to a crack in the wall that ran from floor to ceiling. "This appeared about 6 weeks ago. We patched it, but it reopened within a week. And look at the window frame." Maya and Captain Patterson examined the window, noting that the frame was no longer square. The glass was under stress, with hairline fractures visible in the corners. "From this angle, you can actually feel the building's movement," David said. "Stand here and focus on that building across the street. You'll notice we're swaying more than we should." Captain Patterson stood quietly for several minutes, his trained senses focusing on the building's movement. Maya watched his expression change from skepticism to serious concern. "Miss Chen, how confident are you in your timeline estimates?" "Based on the rate of deterioration and the additional stress factors, I believe we have days to weeks before the risk becomes critical. But Captain, I need to be honest. I've been conservative in my estimates. If there's any additional stress, severe weather, seismic activity, or changes in the building's load distribution, the timeline could accelerate dramatically." David's radio crackled with a message from his maintenance team. "David, we've got a problem in the basement. That crack near the electrical panel has gotten much bigger overnight." Maya, Captain Patterson, and Dr. Harrison exchanged glances. "Can we see that?" Captain Patterson asked. They took the elevator to the basement, where David led them to a utility area near the building's main electrical panel. A crack that David said had been hairline thin the previous week was now over an inch wide and ran along what Maya immediately recognized as a critical load-bearing wall. "This is accelerating faster than my most pessimistic estimates," Maya said quietly, taking photographs with her phone. "Captain Patterson, this crack indicates that the foundation is shifting significantly. When load-bearing walls in the basement start to fail, the entire structure above becomes unstable." Captain Patterson was already reaching for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Captain Patterson. I need to speak with the duty chief immediately. We may have a situation requiring emergency building evacuation." The radio conversation was brief but intense. Captain Patterson explained the situation, requested immediate backup, and received authorization to proceed with an emergency assessment. "Mr. Walsh, I need you to start quietly notifying the major tenants that we may need to evacuate this building within the next few hours," Captain Patterson said. "Don't create panic, but make sure they're prepared to move quickly if necessary." David nodded grimly. "What about the lunch cafe? They'll have a full crowd in about an hour." Maya felt ice in her stomach. "Captain, If the building fails during lunch rush, we could lose hundreds of people.
That's not going to happen, Captain Patterson said firmly. Dr. Harrison, can you contact your hospital and put them on standby for a possible mass casualty event, just as a precaution? Dr. Harrison was already pulling out his phone. I'll call the emergency department chief now. As they headed back to the lobby, Maya's mind raced through the implications of what they had discovered. The building was deteriorating faster than her analysis had predicted, which meant her timeline estimates were too optimistic. If Captain Patterson ordered an evacuation, it would vindicate her professional assessment, but also confirm her worst fears about the building's stability. In the lobby, David Walsh was making discreet phone calls to department heads and office managers throughout the building. Maya watched through the windows as office workers continued their normal routines, unaware that their workplace had become a ticking time bomb. Maya, Captain Patterson said, I need you to contact that former professor you mentioned. I want a second professional opinion on your analysis, and I want it within the next 2 hours. Maya nodded, pulling out her phone to call Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, her former structural engineering professor at MIT. Dr. Morrison had been a mentor during Maya's graduate studies and had encouraged her to pursue advanced work in structural failure analysis. The phone rang 3 times before Dr. Morrison answered. Maya, what a surprise! How are you doing? Dr. Morrison, I need your help with an urgent structural analysis. I believe a building in downtown is at risk of imminent collapse, and I need someone with credentials to review my calculations. Dr. Morrison's tone immediately became serious. Send me everything you have. I'll review it immediately and call you back within the hour.
Maya quickly emailed her complete analysis to Dr. Morrison, including the photographs from the basement inspection they had just completed. While they waited for the review, Captain Patterson coordinated with the fire department to position emergency vehicles nearby without creating obvious alarm. 45 minutes later, Dr. Morrison called back. Maya, your analysis is solid. The photographic evidence you've provided shows clear signs of catastrophic structural failure in progress. Based on the crack propagation in the basement load-bearing wall, I would estimate you have hours, not days, before this building becomes critically unstable. Captain Patterson, who had been listening on speakerphone, asked, Dr. Morrison, in your professional opinion, should this building be evacuated immediately? Absolutely. Captain, I'm sending you a formal written assessment right now. This building should be evacuated within the next hour, and no one should be allowed to enter until a comprehensive structural evaluation can be completed. Maya felt relief and terror in equal measure. Relief that her analysis had been confirmed by a recognized expert. Terror at the confirmation that hundreds of people were currently working and conducting business in a building that could collapse at any moment. Captain Patterson was already coordinating the evacuation. David, I need you to activate the building's emergency procedures immediately. We're conducting a full evacuation, and I want everyone out within 30 minutes. What should I tell people? David asked. How do I explain this without causing panic? Tell them it's a precautionary evacuation due to structural concerns identified during a safety inspection, Captain Patterson replied. Emphasize that it's precautionary, but make sure they understand it's mandatory and immediate. The building's fire alarm system activated, and Maya watched as people began streaming out of Meridian Plaza in orderly but urgent fashion. Office workers carried personal belongings and looked confused but compliant. The lunch cafe emptied quickly, with customers and staff moving toward the exits. Maya stood on the sidewalk across the street, watching the evacuation with a mixture of professional satisfaction and overwhelming emotion. Mrs. Patterson emerged from the building carrying a small bag and looking shaken. Sarah Kim from Zenith Marketing was helping an elderly visitor navigate the crowded sidewalk. Tom Rodriguez from the accounting firm was on his phone, presumably explaining the situation to clients and colleagues. Maya, Dr. Harrison said, standing beside her, you just saved hundreds of lives. Maya shook her head, still watching the evacuation. We don't know that yet. Maybe the building would have been fine for months or years. Maybe I was wrong about the timeline. But you were right about the danger, Captain Patterson said, joining them. Dr. Morrison's assessment confirms that this building was a disaster waiting to happen. Even if it didn't collapse today or tomorrow, it would have failed eventually, and it would have taken people with it. As the evacuation continued, Maya noticed news crews beginning to arrive. Someone had tipped off the media about the emergency evacuation of a major downtown office building. She felt a moment of panic, realizing that her role in identifying the structural problems would likely become public knowledge. "Captain Patterson," Maya said urgently, "I don't want this to become about me. I just want people to be safe." "Maya, you're going to have to talk to reporters eventually. This is a significant story, and you're the person who prevented what could have been a major disaster."
Maya looked back at Meridian Plaza, now empty except for emergency personnel conducting final safety sweeps. The building looked the same as it had that morning, slightly tilted, subtly wrong in ways that only trained eyes could detect. But now it was an empty monument to the importance of listening to expertise regardless of its source. Her notebook, filled with 3 months of calculations and observations, had become the difference between a normal Tuesday afternoon and a preventable tragedy. The weight of that responsibility and the knowledge of how close they had come to disaster settled on Maya's shoulders like a physical burden. As emergency vehicles surrounded Meridian Plaza and structural engineers arrived to begin formal assessments, Maya realized that her life as an anonymous waitress with a secret engineering degree was about to end forever. By evening, Maya's story had become the lead item on every local news station. "Waitress with MIT engineering degree saves hundreds from building collapse," scrolled across television screens throughout the city. Maya sat in Rosie's diner, watching herself on the small TV above the counter, still unable to fully process the day's events. The formal structural engineering assessment had taken 6 hours. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, no relation to David Walsh, the maintenance supervisor, led a team of 3 structural engineers in a comprehensive evaluation of Meridian Plaza. Their preliminary report, released at 8 p.m., confirmed Maya's analysis in stark professional language. The building exhibits advanced structural failure consistent with foundation settlement and load-bearing wall compromise. Continued occupancy would present unacceptable risk to human life. Dr. Walsh herself had requested to meet with Maya, driving directly from the building site to Rosie's diner. She was a woman in her early 50s, with graying brown hair and the focused intensity of someone who spent her career preventing disasters. "Miss Chen," Dr. Walsh said, settling into the booth across from Maya, "your analysis was remarkably accurate. The rate of structural deterioration you calculated was actually conservative. Our assessment suggests the building was closer to catastrophic failure than even you realized." Maya felt a chill run through her chest. How close? Based on the crack propagation in the basement load-bearing walls and the differential settlement we measured, we estimate the building could have experienced partial collapse within days, possibly hours. The eastern corner you identified would likely have failed first, potentially triggering a progressive collapse of the entire structure. Rosie, who had been listening from behind the counter, sat down heavily on one of the stools. "Dios mío! Maya, you saved all those people." Dr. Walsh nodded emphatically. "Miss Chen, I've been doing structural engineering for 27 years. I've investigated building failures, designed earthquake retrofits, and consulted on some of the most complex structural problems in the country. Your analysis showed the kind of insight and attention to detail that I would expect from an engineer with decades of experience." "But I've never worked as a structural engineer," Maya protested. "I got my degree and then couldn't find opportunities in the field. I've been serving coffee and cleaning offices for 3 years." "That's exactly what makes this so remarkable. You identified a critical structural failure using visual observation and basic calculations without access to specialized equipment or internal building data. That requires not just technical knowledge, but exceptional intuition and analytical thinking. Dr. Harrison, who had been at the hospital coordinating emergency preparedness, arrived at the diner, looking exhausted but relieved. Maya, I just finished debriefing with the hospital administration. They want to thank you personally for preventing what could have been the worst mass casualty event in the city's history.
Maya shook her head, overwhelmed by the attention and praise. I just did what anyone with my background would have done. I saw a problem and tried to get someone to listen. But that's exactly the point, Dr. Walsh said. You didn't just see a problem. You recognized it, analyzed it correctly, and fought to get people to take action. Do you realize how many structural engineers might have noticed some issues but dismissed them as minor concerns? Or how many would have trusted the building management's assurances that everything was fine? Captain Patterson arrived as the dinner rush was winding down, bringing with him the fire chief and the city's emergency management director. Maya suddenly found herself the center of attention for a growing crowd of officials, journalists, and curious onlookers. Ms. Chen, Fire Chief Robert Martinez said, "The city owes you a debt of gratitude. Your actions today prevented what our models suggest could have been a catastrophe affecting 500 to 600 people." Maya felt the weight of those numbers. 500 to 600 people, each with families, friends, dreams, and futures that would have been cut short if she hadn't acted on her observations. Emergency Management Director Carol Thompson, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, sat down across from Maya. "Ms. Chen, we need to talk about what happened here from a systems perspective. How did a building in such dangerous condition go unnoticed by our regular inspection processes?" Maya pulled out her notebook, now famous as the document that had saved hundreds of lives. The building's last official inspection was 6 months ago, before the adjacent construction began. The construction work accelerated the structural problems, but there was no requirement for reinspection based on nearby excavation. "And you identified these problems through visual observation?" Director Thompson asked. "Visual observation, combined with analysis of the building's construction history, soil conditions, and load-bearing capacity calculations," Maya clarified. "I also tracked the rate of change over time, which showed that the problems were accelerating." Dr. Walsh leaned forward. "Director Thompson, this raises serious questions about our inspection protocols. If a waitress with an engineering degree could identify critical structural problems that our official processes missed, we need to examine whether our current safety systems are adequate." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Maya's former professor, Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, who had driven down from Boston after providing the remote consultation that had convinced Captain Patterson to order the evacuation. "Maya," Dr. Morrison said, embracing her former student, "I'm so proud of you. You've demonstrated exactly the kind of engineering judgment and public responsibility that we try to teach at MIT." Dr. Morrison turned to address the group of officials. "I want to be clear about something. Maya's analysis wasn't just lucky guesswork. It was sophisticated structural engineering that demonstrated advanced understanding of building dynamics, failure mechanisms, and risk assessment. She applied textbook principles to a real-world situation and potentially saved hundreds of lives." Maya felt the tears welling up in her eyes. For 3 years, she had felt like her engineering education was wasted, that her degree was just an expensive piece of paper that hadn't led to career opportunities. Now, suddenly, her knowledge and training were being recognized and valued in the most dramatic way possible.
Mrs. Patterson arrived at the diner, having driven directly from her temporary office space where Morrison and Associates had relocated for the evening. She was carrying a large bouquet of flowers and fighting back tears. "Maya, dear," Mrs. Patterson said, "I called my daughter in Seattle to tell her what happened today. When I told her that the waitress from our regular breakfast place had saved my life and the lives of all my coworkers, she started crying. She said she was grateful to God that someone as smart and brave as you was looking out for her mother. Maya stood up to accept the flowers, feeling overwhelmed by the personal dimension of what had happened. These weren't abstract statistics. They were real people, with families who loved them. Sarah Kim from Zenith Marketing arrived with several of her coworkers, all carrying thank you cards and small gifts. Maya, our entire department wanted to thank you personally. We've all been talking about how scary it is to think that we were working in a building that could have collapsed at any moment. Tom Rodriguez from the accounting firm brought his wife and 2 children, introducing them to Maya as the person who saved Daddy's workplace. His youngest daughter, a girl of about 8, had drawn a picture of Maya standing in front of a tall building with the words, "Thank you for keeping my daddy safe," written in purple crayon. As the evening progressed, more and more people arrived at Rosie's diner to thank Maya personally. Building employees, their family members, delivery drivers who regularly visited Meridian Plaza, and even people who simply worked in the downtown area and felt safer knowing that someone like Maya was paying attention to structural safety. David Walsh, the maintenance supervisor, arrived with his wife and teenage son. "Maya, I need to apologize to you. I should have recognized the signs of structural problems months ago. I let my familiarity with the building blind me to what was really happening." Maya shook her head firmly. "Mr. Walsh, you're not responsible for this. The problems were subtle and developed gradually. Even trained engineers might have missed them without systematic observation over time." "But you didn't miss them," David replied. "You saw what I couldn't see even though I was in that building every day. That's not just engineering knowledge, that's a special kind of insight." Dr. Morrison, who had been observing the interactions, pulled Maya aside. "Maya, I want to talk to you about your future. What happened today demonstrates that you have exceptional talent for structural analysis and safety assessment. Have you thought about what you want to do next?" Maya looked around the diner, which had become an impromptu celebration of disaster prevented. "Dr. Morrison, 3 days ago, I was just a waitress trying to convince people to take my concerns seriously. I haven't had time to think about the future." "Well, I've been thinking about it," Martinson said. "I have contacts at several major engineering firms that specialize in structural safety and building forensics. After today, I think you'd find that opportunities in your field might be more available than you expected." Jennifer Walsh, the property manager from Meridian Plaza's management company, arrived looking shaken and contrite. She approached Maya hesitantly, carrying what appeared to be a formal letter. "Miss Chen, I owe you an apology. When you called our office repeatedly over the past weeks, I dismissed your concerns because you were a waitress calling about structural engineering. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Maya accepted the letter, which turned out to be a formal commendation from the property management company, acknowledging her exceptional professional analysis and persistent advocacy for building safety. "Miss Walsh, I understand why you were skeptical. I probably would have been skeptical too if someone in my position had called with similar concerns." "But that's exactly the problem," Jennifer replied. "We created a system where credentials mattered more than analysis, where job titles mattered more than expertise. You had the knowledge to identify a critical safety problem, but we almost ignored you because of assumptions about who you were."
Captain Patterson, who had been coordinating with city officials throughout the evening, approached Maya with an update. "Maya, the mayor wants to meet with you tomorrow to discuss the city's building inspection protocols. She's also interested in discussing a possible consulting role for you in reviewing structural safety procedures." Maya felt a moment of panic. "Captain Patterson, I'm not qualified to consult on citywide safety procedures. I analyzed one building that I happened to observe from my workplace." "Maya," Dr. Morrison interjected, "you're more qualified than you realize. What you did today required advanced understanding of structural engineering, building codes, risk assessment, and emergency management. Most importantly, you demonstrated the judgment to act on your analysis despite significant obstacles." As the evening wore on, news crews continued to request interviews with Maya.
She had agreed to speak with one local television reporter, but found herself overwhelmed by the attention and requests for comment. "I keep thinking about how close we came to disaster," Maya told the reporter. "If the building had collapsed during lunch hour, or if Captain Patterson hadn't been willing to take my analysis seriously, or if Mr. Walsh hadn't supported my concerns with his maintenance observations, there are so many points where this could have gone wrong." The reporter nodded sympathetically. "Miss Chen, what would you say to other people who might observe safety problems but feel like they don't have the credentials or authority to speak up?" Maya thought carefully before answering. "I would say that expertise can come from many sources, and safety concerns should be taken seriously regardless of who raises them. But I would also say that if you have concerns, you need to be persistent and professional. Document your observations, present clear evidence, and don't give up if the first person you contact doesn't listen." Dr. Walsh, the structural engineer who had led the formal assessment, approached Maya as the news interview concluded. "Miss Chen, I have a proposition for you. My firm specializes in building forensics and structural failure analysis. We investigate collapses, design retrofit solutions, and consult on safety assessments. Would you be interested in discussing a position with us?" Maya stared at Dr. Walsh, hardly believing what she was hearing. "You're offering me a job? Based on one analysis?" "I'm offering you an opportunity to interview for a position based on demonstrated expertise, analytical thinking, and professional judgment. What you did today is exactly the kind of work we do, and you did it exceptionally well." As the diner finally began to empty near midnight, Maya found herself sitting with Rosie, Dr. Harrison, and Captain Patterson, processing the surreal events of the day. "Maya," Rosie said gently, "how are you feeling about all this attention?" Maya looked out the window at Meridian Plaza, now surrounded by emergency barriers and illuminated by floodlights as structural engineers continued their detailed assessment. "I feel relieved that people are safe, I feel grateful that people listen to me, and I feel terrified that we came so close to a disaster that could have been prevented months ago if the right systems had been in place." Dr. Harrison raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To Maya Chen, who proved that expertise and courage can come from unexpected places." Captain Patterson and Rosie raised their cups as well. "To preventing disasters," Captain Patterson added. "To never giving up when you know you're right," Rosie concluded.
Maya raised her own cup, thinking about her father and his belief that knowledge without action was just expensive ignorance. Today, she had turned her knowledge into action that saved hundreds of lives. It was, she realized, exactly what he would have wanted her to do. The notebook that had started as a collection of casual observations had become a document that changed lives, challenged assumptions, and demonstrated the importance of listening to expertise wherever it might be found. 6 months later, Maya Chen stood in her new office at Walsh Engineering Associates, reviewing structural safety reports that crossed her desk daily. The nameplate on her door read Maya Chen, P.E., Senior Structural Safety Analyst. Through her window, she could see the empty lot where Meridian Plaza once stood, demolished 3 weeks after the evacuation when engineers determined the building was beyond repair. The city had implemented new protocols requiring immediate structural assessments when adjacent construction began near older buildings. Maya's analysis had become a case study at MIT, and Dr. Morrison regularly shared her story with new engineering students. Rosie's diner still served the downtown breakfast crowd, though Maya only visited on weekends now. Rosie had framed the newspaper article about the evacuation, hanging it proudly beside the coffee machine. Mrs. Patterson sent Christmas cards from her new office building, always signed to our guardian angel engineer.
Maya kept her father's photograph on her desk, alongside the notebook that had saved hundreds of lives. David Chen's words echoed in her mind daily. Knowledge without action was just expensive ignorance. Maya had learned that sometimes the most important engineering work happened not in design studios or construction sites, but in the courage to speak up when something wasn't right. Her expertise had found its voice, and lives depended on it.